Welcome to another deep dive. You ready to hit the road?
Always up for an adventure.
Perfect, because this time we're taking a closer look at Jack Kerouac's On the Road.
Yeah.
A book that's basically a Bible for anyone with a bit of wanderlust.
Yeah, it's one of those books that just captures a feeling.
Absolutely. And you guys sent in some pretty interesting sources. This time around, we've got an excerpt from the Italian Wikipedia page about the book, some literary criticism, a few articles about the Beat Generation and Kerouac himself. Looks like you're really trying to understand what makes this book tick and why it's still so relevant today.
And why it still resonates with so many people all these years later.
Exactly. So before we get lost in the details, can you give us the quick rundown? What's On the Road really about?
Well, on the surface, it's a story about two guys, Sal Paradise and Dean Moriarty, and their wild adventures across America. Think fast cars, jazz music, late nights, a whole Beat Generation scene.
Sounds like my kind of road trip.
Yeah.
But it's more than just a fun adventure story, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's a roman à clef, which basically means it's full of real people hiding behind fictional names.
Ooh, juicy. Like,
Oh.
give us the inside scoop.
Well, for starters, Sal Paradise is actually Jack Kerouac himself.
No way. So he's writing about his own life.
Yep. And Dean Moriarty, his partner in crime, is based on Neil Cassidy, a real-life figure who was like a legend in the beat circles.
So these weren't just made-up adventures. This was Kerouac's real life.
Exactly. And that's what makes the book so powerful. It's not just a story. It's a glimpse into a whole cultural movement. The Beat Generation was all about rebelling against the norm, searching for authentic experiences, and breaking free from those cookie-cutter expectations of post-war America.
Like they were rejecting the whole American dream thing.
You got it. They saw through that facade of prosperity and felt a sense of emptiness, a disconnect between what society was telling them to be and what they really yearned for.
Yeah, I can see that.
And this feeling wasn't unique to Kerouac and Cassidy. The book taps into a sentiment that a lot of young people felt at the time, a kind of disillusionment with the status quo.
Like, is this all there is?
Precisely. They were searching for something more, something real, something that spoke to their souls.
So how did all this play out in the story itself?
Well, the book is structured in 5 parts, each chronicling a different leg of their journey. We follow Sal and Dean from New York to Denver, San Francisco, even down to Mexico City.
Oh, yeah. That reminds me, the Italian Wikipedia excerpt even included a translation of the opening line. It's cool to see how On the Road has reached people across different cultures.
Definitely. It shows how some themes are just universal, that yearning for freedom, for something more. It transcends borders.
Speaking of yearning for something more, there's that famous quote early in the book where Dean says, "We gotta go and never stop going till we get there." And Sal asks, "Where are we going, man?" And Dean just says, "I don't know, but we gotta go." It's like the ultimate expression of that restless energy.
Oh, yeah. That quote perfectly captures the spirit of the Beat Generation. It's not just about physical movement. It's that deep desire to experience life fully, to reject complacency, and to search for something real and authentic.
Yeah, and maybe there isn't even a real place. Maybe it's more like a state of being, a way of life.
Exactly. And that's what makes it so powerful and so relatable, even today.
Especially in today's world where everyone's so caught up in the hustle and bustle, it's refreshing to be reminded that it's okay to just go sometimes, even if you don't have a clear destination in mind.
Right. Plus, you got to remember the context of post-war America: conformity, settling down, chasing material success. That was the message everyone was getting.
And the Beats were like, nah, we're good.
Exactly. They craved something different, something that felt true to them, not some prepackaged version of the American dream.
Which is pretty interesting because that whole idea of rejecting the mainstream really foreshadowed all those counterculture movements that came later, like the hippies in the 60s, the anti-war protests. It's like Kerouac was tapping into a feeling that would soon become huge.
Totally. On the Road wasn't just reflecting a personal journey, it was capturing a cultural undercurrent that was about to explode.
So it's more than just a road trip story. It's a piece of history, a window into a time when things were really starting to shift.
Absolutely. And it all started with Kerouac himself.
Okay, so let's talk about the man behind the wheel, Jack Kerouac. We know he based this on his real-life adventures, but the way he wrote it is pretty wild, too. The whole book in just 3 weeks on a single scroll of paper. Can you believe that?
It's pretty legendary, right? And get this, it was originally written with real names.
Whoa, no wonder it got rejected by so many publishers. Can you imagine the lawsuits?
Right. Luckily, his editor, Malcolm Cowley, had the brilliant idea of using pseudonyms to protect everyone involved.
Good call, because that original scroll ended up selling for over $2 million. Talk about a valuable piece of history.
It just shows how iconic this book has become. It's a true cultural artifact.
And part of what makes it so special is Kerouac's writing style. Spontaneous prose, he called it. It's almost like he translated jazz music into words.
Yeah, it's got that same free-flowing energy, that raw, unfiltered emotion.
Can you break that down for us a bit more? What makes it so different?
Well, imagine a jazz musician improvising a solo. It's all about capturing the moment, letting the music flow freely. And that's what Kerouac did with words. He wanted to capture the raw flow of thoughts and experiences just as they happened, without overthinking or polishing them. It makes the writing feel so fast-paced and energetic, kind of like you're right there in the car with them.
I can practically hear the jazz music playing in the background.
Exactly. And remember, this is a roman à clef, so it's like a who's who of the beat generation. Allen Ginsberg shows up as Carlo Marx, and William S. Burroughs is Old Bull Lee.
Wow, so you're not just reading a story, you're meeting the real people who shaped a whole movement.
And that adds another layer to all those themes we were talking about. The disillusionment, the search for identity, the rebellion, it makes it all feel even more real and powerful because these were actual people grappling with these issues.
It's like a blend of fiction and reality, history and art all rolled into one.
Exactly. And it makes you realize just how intertwined this book is with the Beat generation itself. It's not just a story about a movement, it's a product of it.
So we've got this incredible mix of personal experience, historical context, and a totally unique writing style. It's no wonder On the Road has had such a huge impact. But before we dive into that, I think it's time to look more closely at the people who joined Sal and Dean on their journey, the other passengers on this wild ride.
And these passengers, as you call them, they weren't just along for the ride, they were key to the whole story and to understanding the Beat generation, like Marilu, for example.
Fill me in.
Well, she's based on Luann Henderson, Neil Cassidy's first wife, and she represents this kind of free spirit, a woman who wasn't afraid to challenge the traditional roles.
Definitely ahead of her time.
Oh, yeah. And then there's Carlo Marx, who we mentioned before is based on Allen Ginsberg, one of the biggest names in beat poetry.
Oh yeah, Ginsberg.
He was like the intellectual, the deep thinker of the group.
Always searching for the meaning of life, right?
Exactly. Wrestling with big questions, much like Ginsberg himself.
And we can't forget Old Bull Lee, based on William S. Burroughs.
Ah, Burroughs. He was a whole other level, super experimental with his writing, always exploring those darker sides of society.
Yeah, he had a reputation. So how does that translate to Old Bull Lee in the book?
Well, he's like the ultimate outsider, the one who really embodies that countercultural perspective. He's not afraid to push boundaries, to challenge everything.
So basically, each of these characters adds another layer to the story, and they all reflect real people who were shaking things up back then, whether it was in art, literature, or just how they lived their lives.
It's amazing, right? On the Road wasn't just a story, it was like a snapshot of a whole cultural movement in action. These real people pushing boundaries and living on their own terms.
And that's why it's still so relevant today. It's not just about the beats anymore. It's about that timeless desire to be yourself, to break free from expectations and to live a life that feels authentic.
Speaking of On the Road being everywhere, remember that Italian Wikipedia excerpt we talked about? It mentioned this Topolino comic that actually referenced the book.
Whoa, really? That's wild. It's crazy how this book has popped up in the most unexpected places.
Right. It's like it's become a part of our collective imagination. It's seeped into pop culture everywhere, from music to art to fashion, even travel.
Think about the music that came after the beats. The folk revival, psychedelic rock, even punk. They all owe something to that spirit of rebellion, that search for authenticity that On the Road captured so well.
Totally. The Beats provided a soundtrack for a whole generation that was trying to find themselves, trying to break free from all those rules and expectations. And their impact goes way beyond music. It's in art, fashion, film. You can even see it in how people approach travel these days. That desire to get off the beaten path, to experience something real and raw.
It's incredible how one book could spark such a massive shift in culture.
It's a testament to how raw and honest it was, how it tapped into something universal, that desire to break free, to be true to yourself that resonates with people no matter where they are or what time period they're in.
That desire to find your own path,
Yeah.
To figure out what really matters to you and go after it. It's as relevant today as it was back then, maybe even more so, with all the pressure we face to conform, to fit in, to follow a certain script.
Exactly. In a world where everyone's trying to be perfect, to live up to these impossible standards, On the Road reminds us that it's okay to be a little messy, a little unconventional, to forge your own path, even if it means going against the grain.
It's like a breath of fresh air. A reminder that it's okay to be different, to embrace your own unique journey.
And it's not always easy to do that, right? To go against the grain, to challenge those expectations.
Yeah, but it's worth it.
It totally is. And On the Road shows us that, you know? It gives us permission to be ourselves, to make mistakes, to get lost sometime.
To live life on our own terms.
Precisely. On the Road isn't just a road trip novel, it's a blueprint for a different way of being in the world. It's about prioritizing experiences over possessions, freedom over conformity, authenticity over expectations.
Yeah, it's about choosing your own adventure. But hold on, I know On the Road has had a huge impact and inspired so many people, but it's also gotten some criticism over the years, hasn't it?
Yeah, you're right. Some people have found the writing a bit repetitive or felt it lacked depth, and there's been some criticism around how women are portrayed in the book, which is a valid point.
It's true, no book is perfect, and On the Road is definitely a product of its time.
Absolutely, and it's important to acknowledge those criticisms, to look at the book with a critical eye and be aware of its limitations.
But even with those flaws, On the Road's impact is undeniable. It's influenced literature, art, music, even the way we think about travel and adventure. And I think it continues to resonate with people today because it speaks to that universal longing to find our own way to live a life that feels meaningful and authentic.
It challenges us to question the status quo, to step outside our comfort zones, to embrace the unknown. It reminds us that life is a journey, not just a destination.
So what does all this mean for you, our listener? You came to this deep dive wanting to understand what makes On the Road so captivating and enduring. And I think we've covered a lot of ground here. We've explored the story, the context, the characters, the writing style, the legacy. But now I want to turn it back to you.
Knowing what you now know about Kerouac's journey, both the literal one on the road and the literary one of writing this iconic book, What Does the Open Road Symbolize to You? What are those uncharted territories in your own life? Those dreams, those desires, those experiences you're longing for?
And maybe even more importantly, are you willing to take that first step to chase them?
It's all about taking that leap of faith, right? Trusting that even if you don't have all the answers, the journey itself will guide you.
Yeah, and that those unexpected detours, those bumps in the road, they're all part of the experience.
Exactly. They shape us, they teach us, they make the journey worthwhile.
And those unexpected encounters, those could be pretty powerful too.
Oh, absolutely. It could be a random conversation with a stranger or a chance meeting with someone who inspires you.
Or maybe it's just about slowing down, taking a moment to appreciate the little things, the everyday beauty that we often miss when we're rushing through life.
You know, that reminds me of something Kerouac wrote. He said, "The road is life. It's not just about the physical journey, it's about how we approach every single day. Are we present? Are we open to new experiences?"
Are we actually living or just going through the motions?
Right. It's a challenge to be more mindful, to savor each moment, each encounter, each twist and turn along the way.
And that's something we can all do.
Yeah.
Even if we can't hit the open road like Sal and Dean, we can still cultivate that spirit of adventure in our everyday lives.
Definitely. Maybe it's trying a new hobby or taking a different route to work.
We're just being more spontaneous, saying yes to things that scare us a little.
Exactly. It's about pushing those boundaries, stepping outside that comfort zone.
Because who knows, maybe that one small step will lead to something incredible, something you never even imagined.
It's all about embracing those possibilities, trusting that the journey will unfold as it should.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into On the Road, I want to leave you with this. What's your open road? What are you itching to explore? What adventures are calling your name?
And remember, the open road doesn't have to be a solo trip. It can be a shared experience with friends, family, loved ones.
Or even strangers who become companions along the way.
That's the beauty of it. It's a journey that's always evolving, always offering new perspectives and possibilities.
So channel that Beat Generation spirit. Tap into that desire for real, authentic experiences and get out there and explore.
Hit the road, whatever that looks like for you.
We've reached the end of our deep dive, folks. Thanks for joining us on this exploration of On the Road. We hope it's inspired you to embrace your own adventures, whatever they may be.
Keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.
There's a whole world out there waiting to be discovered.